It is a bit irreverent and certainly not scriptural, but I have this mental picture of the disciples. It's several years after Jesus' death and resurrection, and the disciples have gathered together and they are talking about the good old days, laughing, teasing, reminiscing the way friends who have shared a life-changing experience often do. And then one of them looks at Peter and says, "Hey, Satan, tell us about that day you rebuked Jesus." And another joins in, "Yeah, how did that work out for you?" And another, "Just what in the world were you thinking, Peter?" And Peter begins to speak. I just didn't like the whole suffering and dying thing. I didn't get it. That's not what I signed up for. That's not who I thought the Messiah would be. And the others become quiet, and they recall that day like it was yesterday. And they begin to realize that Peter did not say anything they weren't thinking. Maybe Peter didn't say anything we haven't thought or even wanted to say. Jesus has a very different understanding of discipleship than what most of us probably want. When another's reality and vision begin to conflict with and overtake our own, what do? We rebuke. We take them aside to enlighten them, to help them understand, to show them the error of their ways. That's all Peter did. If we are really honest, haven't we, at some point, disagreed with Jesus, asking why he doesn't do what we want? Why won't he see the world our way? It all seems so clear to us, doesn't it? If he can cast out the demons and silence the crazy guy in the synagogue, surely he could silence the voices that drive us crazy. If he can heal Peter's mother-in-law, why not those we love? If he can cleanse the leper, why does our life sometimes leave us feeling unclean and isolated? If he can make the paralytic walk, why are so many crippled by fear, dementia, addiction? If he can calm the sea, surely he could calm the storms of our world. Yet they rage on. Violence, war, poverty. If he can keep Jairus' daughter from dying, why not our children, our friends, our loved ones? If he can feed 5,000 with a few fish and pieces of bread, why does much of the world this day go to bed hungry? I have wondered about these things. I have been asked these questions. I know some who have lost faith and left the church over these matters. These are our rebukes of Jesus. He is not being or acting the way we want him to. And his words, sometimes they challenge and shock us. Maybe we're not so different from Peter. Just a few verses before this morning's gospel, Jesus asked, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter named Jesus as the Christ, the Messiah, the anointed one of God. Jesus is the one of whom the prophets spoke, the one for whom Israel has waited, the one who was supposed to restore God's people. Peter is right, and yet he does not understand. Peter has an image of what the Messiah is supposed to do and who the Messiah is supposed to be. We all have our images and wishes about who Jesus is and what he should do. All is well when Jesus is casting out demons, healing the sick, preventing death, feeding the multitudes. We like that Jesus. We'll follow that Jesus. Jesus will not, however, conform to our images of who we think he is or who we think he should be. Instead, he asks us to conform to who he knows himself to be, the one who must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And so he sets a choice before us. It is a choice we each have to make. It is a choice set before us again and again by the circumstances of life. We either choose ourselves and deny Jesus, or we deny ourselves and choose Jesus. If any want to become my followers, he says, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Self-denial is the beginning of discipleship. I suspect that is not what Peter had in mind when Jesus said, follow me and I will make you fish for people. I wonder if that is what we had in mind when we woke up to come to church this morning, or what we think about when our baby is baptized, or how often we understand and practice our faith as daily self-denial. Jesus' words are hard, his way extreme. Surely we think God did not covenant with his people and bring them out of Egypt into the promised land only to say, now let it all go. No, the Messiah is supposed to offer security, protection, put Israel back on top. Faith in Jesus, Peter is learning, is not about the elimination of risks, the preservation of life, the ability to control. Instead, Jesus asks us to risk it all, abandon our lives, and relinquish control to God. That is what Jesus is doing, and he expects nothing less of those who would follow him. The way of Christ, self-denial, reminds us that our life is not our own. It belongs to God. It reminds us that we are not in control. God is. It reminds us that our life is not about us, but rather about God. If we will walk that way, we discover that there is great freedom in knowing those things, freedom to be fully alive. Through self-denial, our falling down becomes rising up. Losing is saving. Death is resurrection. As long as we believe our life is about us, we will continue to exercise power over others, try to save ourselves, control our circumstances, and maybe even rebuke Jesus. Jesus rarely exercised power over others or tried to control circumstances. He simply made different choices. Now, self-denial is not about being out of control or powerless, but it is about the choices we make. Jesus chose to give in a world that takes, to love in a world that hates, to heal in a world that injures, to give life in a world that kills. Jesus offered mercy when others sought vengeance, forgiveness when others condemned, and compassion when others were indifferent. Jesus trusted God's abundance when others said there was not enough. With each choice, he denied himself and showed that God was present. At some point, those kind of choices will catch the attention of and offend those who live and profit by power, control, and looking out for number one. They will not deny themselves, and they will respond. Jesus said they would. He knew that he would be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes. It has happened in every age for those who chose the path of self-denial. When it happened for Jesus, he made one last choice. He chose resurrection over success, wealth, fame, even survival. The same choice is before us. Jesus said, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me."